Good morning, everybody. This is Mike Hudson, along with my co-host Greg Traynor with the Accessible Pursuits podcast. I'm super excited about this new journey we get to go on together, and we've got a great lineup coming for this year. I'm just excited to be on a new adventure with Greg, and we're just going to see where it goes. But Greg, how are you doing up in PA today, my man?
Man, I'm doing really good. The weather's starting to turn around. We're making the transition from wintertime to spring, and I think it's going to be about 60 degrees here, and it's just going to be a good day, all in all.
Absolutely. I know you and I got to talk a little bit, and you guys were in the 40s yesterday, and we've been having a lot of smoke. We've got some wildfires down this way, but I think they're trying to get them contained. We'll see what happens, but um, doggone, if we're not going from hurricanes and tornadoes, we're going to, it's you hate to say it, but it's almost like the Wizard of Oz, man. I'm just waiting on something quirky to kick in.
It has been such a crazy year, with all the floodings, the tornadoes, the wildfires, and really, as people with disabilities, we have to, be very concerned and have a plan about that. And I, I'll be praying for the people affected down in your area. We were watching that on the news the other night, and wife and I were saying, "Man, that's just a tragedy what's going on down there."
Well, that for a while they had it over on the West Coast. Those guys were getting inundated with fires, and then was it 2 years ago in Hawaii? And we never know. All we can do is be vigilant. Just try to do the best we can. Always have a plan. We go back to those old podcasts in the past and some conversations you and I have had. The Marine Corps has that. If you have one, you got none. You got two, you got one. So it's always just, know where your medicine's at, know where your documents are at, ways to get out of your home, look for safety and that kind of measure. And, just enjoy life, dude. It goes on, but we just, again, with people with disabilities and whatnot, we just got to take one extra step. It's not that big a deal.
Exactly. If you have a good plan and you have people around you that support you, there's nothing we can't do. It's definitely just being prepared.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. Always, we talk about it a good bit, being intentional with your family. We have to be intentional about our care. You and I, rather, are both having some issues with pressure sores and that kind of stuff. And it's all about intentionality. We have to be in our health, making sure we're watching out for the secondary issues that coincide with our spinal cord injuries as quadriplegics. We always got those. The wheelchair is the easy part. It's all the extra stuff, the accoutrements that come along with it. That's the hard part.
That's something I don't think everybody realizes with a high level spinal cord injury. It's not the not walking that is, the problem. It's all the secondary things that go along with it. And we talk about that quite a bit. And I'm sure other people with disabilities have other issues, but it can be a challenge. And we definitely have to stay on top of our health care and make sure that we're directing the people around us and also researching it and trying to learn and be as knowledgeable so that when we speak with people, we have an intelligent perspective that, we're listened to.
Absolutely. That's one of the kickers, Greg, is I know you stay on top of it, and Beth, she's really great at doing it. And that's the biggest part. We have to be our own advocate, and we make sure that you know that your voice is there. Make sure it's heard. And, only you can step up and step in for your own health care. And if you feel like something's going awry or that, you don't want to do something via medical staff, make sure you voice that opinion. I'm having to do it now just with wound vacs and that kind of stuff and just say, hey, I think we need to go another route. And
Right.
there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't make you a bad patient. It actually makes you more proactive in your own health care.
That's a fact, Mike. And, sometimes they're hard decisions. I mean, I've been dealing with the pressure wound for a long time, a few years now, and I know you are as well. And sometimes what works for somebody else or a person that's not in a wheelchair doesn't necessarily work for us. And
Oh, 100%, dude.
you
And
know
that's
the
that's the kicker. You said it. I know some guys that have done wound vacs and that kind of stuff in the past that have had great success, but I think it's where it's at,
Mhm.
and then how they apply it. And I've never really had much problem with pressure, but seems like the older we get, the more trouble we're going to have, which is probably, should be accounted for. I mean, that should be common sense. But then it gets back into, what do you do to kind of counteract that?
Yep.
And so we have to, do everything we can via seat cushions and that kind of thing.
It's really a constant, thought on our mind with pressure relief, throughout the day in our wheelchairs. I've always been pretty diligent about doing a weight shift about every 20 minutes. Sometimes, you get involved with something and you can't do it on that schedule, but I know you're really conscious of weight shifting and how you sleep. And sometimes it's doing everything you can, and we still end up with a pressure
Yeah.
wound that takes 15 or 20 minutes to get and literally years to heal.
And that's the funny thing is, you and I both were blessed to go to Shepherd Center. And they're notorious for, every hour, every 3 hours coming in and rotating you and shifting you at night. And you need to do a pressure shift for every hour you're on your tailbone. You need 30 seconds off of it, and yada yada. And when I got home from the hospital, man, I was on it like Donkey Kong. And then, this is year 30, man, and not to sound like it gets lax, but you're like, I'm sleeping all night tonight. I'm just going to stay on my back. And, I've been really blessed over those 30 years that this is really the only second pressure issue I've had. But you're right. Great. In 2 hours, you can get something that'll take you 2 years to get rid of.
Yes, sir. And in the real world in life, take for instance, like after my injury, I went back to school and got my master's. And you're in a college setting. That class could be 3 hours.
Right.
How do you weight shift if you're in the front of the class? So I always kind of planned on being in the back of the class and let the professors know, beforehand, hey, about every half hour I'm going to go back. It's pressure relief. And some of the professors were very knowledgeable and understood that right away. And other people kind of gave me that deer in the headlights look, like, what are you doing? Are you sleeping or that? I mean,
Right.
I never want to disrupt a classroom or disrupt a program that I'm in. But, weight shifts are important and they need to be done. And we can't be embarrassed about taking care of our bottoms.
Yeah. And I'm like you back when I was in college, I went and right after I got hurt, my master's program, I'm in a manual wheelchair. And so I was able to lift for a little while. Now I'm having some trouble with shoulders and that kind of thing. But yeah, you don't want to be disruptive, but I've always been a fidgeter. And so, I might not necessarily take time to do a full on, lift up to get all the way off, but I'm lifting this cheek and then I rock it back over and lift the other cheek. And it's funny enough, as long as we're keeping that blood flow and keeping it moving, we do pretty good. But I'm like you, dude. I don't want to be disruptive and I don't want to bring negative attention. It's like, look at this guy, he's tilting back like a rocket ship, in our power chairs. But it is what it
Exactly.
is. It's just all part of paralysis, man. It's um that open empathetic dialogue where, like you said, the professors now are knowledgeable. And then we're teaching the people around us what's going on. So it's bringing positivity to a negative situation.
Definitely, definitely. Now, Mike, since we're kind of going on a new adventure with our Accessible Pursuits podcast, I mean, some of these questions I wanted to ask you may seem silly because we've been friends for I don't know 15 years or so, working together
Yeah.
on different projects. But for the people that are just kind of tuning in, you want to tell them a little bit about yourself and how you're doing with Roar Outdoors and just kind of explain to people a little bit about Mike Hudson.
Yeah, man, I truly appreciate the opportunity. You hit the nail on the head though, man. We've been doing this so long, we know each other in and out. Um, which is funny, 15 years or so, you're probably not far off. We've and maybe even longer than that. But
Maybe.
I sustained a spinal cord injury at the C6-7 level from a diving accident in 1995. So again, this is going on year 30 for me if I can make it till June, God willing. But we started a nonprofit called Roar Outdoors in 2014, and it stands for Rediscovering Outdoor Activities and Recreation. I always tell people it's about others' passions, and so all the guys and girls that are on the board, all the guys and girls that we try to service, it's about finding their passions. You and I have had this discussion for a long time. I love being in the woods. I love fishing. I love hunting. I love camping. Anything outdoors, man, that's what I want to do. And so what we started doing is again in 2014, it was really about um, seeing that excitement, that light come on in somebody's eyes after they had an injury or an ailment, and then they wanted to try to get back to life, and seeing what we could do to help facilitate whatever their passions are. And so whenever we're approaching somebody new or we're working with somebody, it's all about, tell me what you're passionate about and let's see if we can make that happen. Um, I'm blessed enough, and you would understand this, Greg, and I'm hoping the people listening will. Anything that I did prior to my injury, other than walk, I can do again from a wheelchair standpoint. It's just about rediscovering that new love and a new outlet for the same old routines. And it's just finding new ways to do those routines where it's fun, applicable for wheelchair life. But um, it's been a great run so far, and we've got a lot going on here in South Carolina, and we're hoping to make some changes. But lots of big changes on the way.
Dude, you are after it every day. And, you surround yourself with a core group of guys and women that understand what you're about and understand the pursuits that you're trying to chase down. You always are fond of saying, you don't want to hand out, you want to hand up.
Yeah,
And that's a fact. What you're trying to do is elevate people uh, to where they want to be. You're trying to assist them in what they're trying to accomplish, whether that be in the outdoors, whether it's in life. I know that you're very active in your community, you're very active in your church. You try to meet people where they are and then
yeah.
get them where they want to be.
Greg, you're right, man. It's all about again empathetic dialogue. It's about allowing somebody to, for all fun and practical purposes, take a ride on our seat. Really kind of step into our shoes for a few minutes, and dude, I think that you and I have said this before. If we're going to make any change where it comes to ADA or any of these protocols that really help the disability community, we've got to be involved in the leadership change paradigm of that. If we don't, all we're doing is we're sitting back and we're making suggestions.
Right.
That's not necessarily a negative thing either. I think we need to all have intentionality behind conversations, but sometimes, we've had this discussion too. The ADA right now is nothing but a book of suggestions with no bite behind it. And so changes need to come to fruition. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a negative thing. We can talk about advocacy on airlines and all of these things that need to be addressed, but they don't need to be a negative. We can come with a positive spin. But dude, you get it, and you said it. We have to surround ourselves with people that have an understanding of it, but people that also challenge us. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we used to joke around when I was in the Marine Corps. If you're the smartest or the strongest or the fastest guy in the room, then you need to find another room. You need somebody that's always going to be a little bit better to challenge you, to bring out that little extra spark in you. And I'm blessed that I got guys like you that really keep me challenged in that, and I thank you for it, brother.
Oh, Mike, I feel the same way. And, we're in a situation where we get to talk with people throughout the country and we get to see people at their best and at their worst. And we get to just work with some incredible people. I mean, I think about, you in the Marine Corps Marathon last year and the team that you put around yourself was just incredible, world class. And if you can reach out to people and educate people about where you're coming from, most of the time, I mean, 9 out of 10 times, people can't do enough to get on board with the program. and want to make change and want to help once they realize what you're all about.
That's the kicker is, we've said this before too. The disability community is a super small community. It's really tight knit. Kind of when you get in there and you're working with people that want to make change and want to be different and seen as different. And that's not again, not a handout or a feel bad for me. I don't want anybody's sympathy. I would love people's respect, and I'm gonna get that respect one way or another, but I want the respect for doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And, it's again about surrounding yourself with positive people, trying to make change. And, Greg, it's not always about the change that we're going to see. It's about trying to make change for the people coming up behind us and beside us. You and I have been doing this a good long time now. And, what I want to see is the positivity for the newer injuries. Unfortunately, man, we've got guys and girls that are getting hurt every year that are in our same boat, and you hate to see the community grow. Unfortunately, that's just the nature and part of the course.
You know, being injured 26 years for myself, I was injured in a diving accident in 99.
Mhm.
And we are just, you know, underprepared for this life. Growing up in school, you don't really interact with people with disabilities or have the knowledge or the experience that prepares you to live this life. So so we were fortunate at Shepherd that they educated us real
Mhm.
quick and in a hurry. But I was unprepared for this life. And the last 26 years, I feel like I get a little closer every day to understanding it, understanding what's important, and to educate, not only my family, but the people in my community about what we need to be successful and to have a seat at the table on policies.
You're right, dude, because you can't know everything about every disability, and that's why we have to surround ourselves with different people, different groupings, and then try to figure those things out. But you and I have both said this before too. Education is one of those things they can't take away from you. So
Mm-hmm.
I try to grow and learn something new every day. It's not a pat on the back. It's not like, hey, look at me, I'm in school or whatever, which we do fall in a different demographic with that as well, Greg. And it's kind of funny. I lean on my faith a lot, and I get to see guys and girls that really did not let their injury get in their way. They kind of stepped around it and figured out new ways to continue to push forward. And you and I both went back to school after our injuries and really, got after it even harder. And it's about just trying to find the positivity behind what can I do now to be a good solid citizen, and what's it going to take for me to be approachable. And then too, I wanted my daughter to see a dad that was going to push forward and not let the injury slow him down. And some of it, not to make excuses, is ignorance. Before I got hurt, I would see somebody in a chair and I just thought, hey, they couldn't walk. And it was never a mean thing or a crass thing. And it wasn't like I didn't want to get to know people. It was just that wasn't in my niche, that wasn't into the grouping that I was in. Um, and it doesn't want to sound, like you're cliquish and you're, boxing people out or any of that. It's just I didn't have a lot of folks around me that were living with disabilities, and so until you're in that situation, it's kind of hard to really break out and talk about all those things. But we've had this discussion before too. We've been blessed to be on a lot of boards and panels, and then be able to really have that deep down conversation where we get a lot deeper than superficial, and we really talk about our injuries. And then not to dwell into people's souls per se, but to really get down to the nitty gritty of what it is to be paralyzed and try to give somebody some real meat when it comes to that meal.
And one of the things that, you and I, we were adult men that had a high level of confidence. We had lots of work experience. we were secure in our roles in society when our injuries happened. I always think about the young people, or you have a teenager or somebody that really hasn't had the opportunity to find themselves and to be on a path, and then have a significant injury, or be born with a disability and not have the life experience that you and I have. And I think, man, that is the real challenge of somebody young being injured, or somebody that is born with a disability that hasn't had the life experience. Where do we lift that person up? How do we help them on the road to success? Um, that's always been one of my concerns when I see a young person. I want to make sure I talk with them and maybe give them an encouraging word, or encourage what they're after, and kind of sit down and talk with them. I think they're really challenged just with their ages.
And you're right. I got hurt right before my 23rd birthday. And we kind of joke around about that. I was doing a speaking engagement the other day. And one of the ladies said, "Man, you did a lot before your 23rd birthday." And I said, "Well, I'm one of those Gen X guys anyway, and so I've always had to be the man of the house, even at 8 and 10 years old. You go and do." And I think that leads some too, Greg, is that you and I both, you were in loss prevention and did counseling work, and I was in law enforcement in the military, and it's about just picking up and carrying on and continuing to go. But man, you're right. You got to think about the mindset of carrying on, and we can't do anything to change our injuries. And then two, you're right. There's a lot of guys in chairs because we do a lot of stupid stuff, and so typically it's more guys than ladies. Um, but we also too have to remember that we're seeing these guys and girls on usually the worst time of their life, right when that injury occurs. And so they're having to try to figure all this stuff out. They went from you hate to say you have to kind of mourn through that, because I had 23 years of a certain lifestyle that I thought I was heading on and I was building up for. And then, God made a change and now we're going in a different direction. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just a different direction. And we have to make a conscious decision every day that, and I'm speaking for myself, get up out of the bed and go do something positive, because I could lay in the bed and feel sorry for myself. But at the end of the day, all I'm doing is just laying in bed and feel sorry for myself. I'm not getting anywhere.
And you and I kind of both say before injury and after injury, we have two different lives.
Yes.
And you're going up on 30 years. I'm 20, 26. We've almost lived half of our life able-bodied and half of our life disabled. And as you said, it's not necessarily good or bad. It's life, and it's what we make the most of it. And we're still out there trying to pursue our passions, trying to, interact with family as best we can, interact with friends. I mean, I've lost friends that before my injury, I thought they were really, close friends of mine, people I worked with. You kind of really find out who your friends are that stick with you long term. And I don't know if you'd like to talk a little bit about that, maybe friends you had before and friends you have after.
It's funny that you say that. This would be it's quirky when you get to that anniversary, right? Where you're like, man, I've been rolling longer than I was walking. And then when you sit there and you really try to put thought behind that process, you're like, wow, okay. So it's two different lifestyles, two completely different lifestyles. It doesn't mean that you're not still serving and you're not doing. It's just different. And so I got people all the time that are like, man, if you could go back and you could change, well, I can't, what if? But at the same token, I don't know if they came up with a cure, if I'd be the first in line. I'm so used to this lifestyle now. And that doesn't make it a positive, because trust me, being in a wheelchair, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy with paralysis. It is a tough row to hoe. And it's all the secondary stuff that we spoke of. But you're right. When these injuries occur, you really find out who your friends and people in your corner are. Um, like I said, I was in law enforcement when I got hurt, and um, there was a ton of people at the hospital, and that quickly dwindles, and you start seeing who's in your corner for the right reasons, the people behind you. And then we see it too now, even Greg, what you and I are doing, with organizations not wanting to work together. And more and more people just don't, for whatever reason. I don't know if it's just somebody's worried about losing a dollar, or not being in the limelight, or whatever it is. I don't know. Because you and I have had this discussion before, and this is what I love about doing this with you. Egos go out the window, and um, I just enjoy highlighting people, to be able to talk about new ways of doing, and organizations that are still pouring into life, being able to highlight people that are finding the best things, and the little cliquey cliche stuff of living the best life and going and doing. That's really, shouldn't that be what we're highlighting, is just the positives in what could be a negative. But
Absolutely. And you and I have both met some great individuals
mhm,
after our injury, and we're gonna, in fact, have one of them on here in a little bit, Mr. Coy Varnum. And
absolutely,
you've known Coy a lot longer than I have. Um, One of the things that really sticks with me about Coy is I had the opportunity to meet him when we had him on the podcast,
mhm,
and Coy is a unique individual, and I don't want to take any thunder away when we introduce him, but I'm really looking forward to talking with him. He's meant a lot to me since that podcast. He's reached out to me almost every day with
yeah,
a really good inspirational text, and truly cares about people. And up until that point, I had never met Coy before, and we had him on the podcast. He's a good friend of yours, and he's really become a good friend of mine. So I'm fortunate that I've had the opportunity to meet some great people after my spinal cord injury.
yeah. And it's one of those things. You're right, because Coy's kind of, again, we don't want to jump into getting ahead of ourselves, but he's one of those oddities in that, longevity. He's been doing quadriplegia for a long time, but he's a wealth of knowledge, and he does something that's very unique, and it's that iron sharpening iron, and he really reaches out and wants to touch people. And that's one of the things, Greg, that I don't get to say thank you enough to you. And it's not for blowing smoke or anything else. It's just, it's one of those things. You're one of those guys I can call, and you're always there. And so, friendship goes a long way. And you've asked me a couple questions about that, and I know your life and your injury. Um, tell some of the folks a little bit about your injury and how it occurred. I know we briefly touched on it, but and then what you guys, I know you and Beth got all these new adventures going on with the farm and everything. So
Sure.
it,
Well, first of all, I appreciate your friendship, buddy, and friendship goes both ways. So whenever I call, you always pick up the phone, and that's to share my success or to pick me up when I'm down. Because when we're on podcast and now we're doing our Facebook pages, everything kind of seems great sometimes, and that's not always the case.
yeah,
Social media can prop people up, and everybody's having a great time, and we're always being positive. So sometimes we're low, and sometimes we're needing a hand, and you're always there for me, and man, I appreciate you.
hey,
um, my injury happened whenever I was 31. Much like very similar to you, I had a diving accident. Mine was in a lake. I was in waist deep water and thought I dove out and just dove down and hit my head and broke my neck. I'm C4 or 5 complete. Um, so I'm basically paralyzed from the chest down. And that was 26 years ago. And started a new life. Went back to school, got my master's in rehab. Um, Rehabilitation counseling at the University of Pittsburgh, and I've got a pretty good life now. my wife Beth and I, we try to make the best of things. We go on new adventures. We've got a little bit of property that we're growing apple trees, and Beth has got into beekeeping last year, and that's always exciting. We try to do as much in our community as we can. I try to talk with people and kind of give them my perspective on things. I'm on a bunch of different boards. I've kind of slowed down a little bit on being on board of directors so that I can work on, the farm property and spend time down there. But I just try to make the best out of life. But it's not always easy. It's not always fun and games. There's a lot going on with my health, and um, we appreciate the people we surround ourselves with.
Yeah, you did it right, and you're saying it right, and you you are right. We can't have a great day every day. We try to put on a good face. Guys are notorious for it anyway. We try to. I run in small circles, and it's when you trying to be open and honest, receptive to people. A lot of times, if you ask a guy in a group setting, how you doing, you're always going to get that same buffered answer. Oh, I'm good. When they're not.
Yep.
And then when you get to that one-on-one and you can really get down to brass tacks, that's really what it's about. Is just um, we just want to be able to touch each other in a way that allows that other person to know, hey man, I'm here for you. My wife jokes around and says I'm like a vault. Sometimes, people give me information and I never tell her what's going on. And that's not my part of the journey. My part of the
Right.
journey is to listen, to try to be the best friend that I can be, and then be able to take that information and bounce it back when they need it. Sometimes, I'll call you and just dump a bunch of stuff in your lap, and it's not even that I want an answer. It's just sometimes I've got to get it out.
And Mike, I hope everyone has a friend as good as you. That I can do that with you. You can do that with me, and I think that's what makes life, possible is when you have a good friend that you can tell how you're feeling because you're right. We don't tell everybody how we're feeling on a daily basis. When people say, Greg, how you doing? Oh man, I'm doing good. How are you doing? I try to, deflect and put it back
Yeah.
on them and find out how their day is going because you never want to be that person that every time somebody calls you, you got a complaint or an ailment or I don't feel well or uh, I'm passing 6 kidney stones today or you know what I mean? Sometimes
Yeah.
it's a rough go and I hope everybody has that one friend or several friends that you can actually be honest with and tell them what's going on in your daily life.
And some of it, man, is just it's not that I'm a secretive person, but time is one of those things that's the commodity you can't get back. And we've lost friends in the past, and you see who your true friends are. I'm not going to let somebody have any control over my life, and they're not going to know that much about me. It's going to stay superficial. And so I pour 100% into those people that I know and love and trust. And I want them to know me on a personal level. And
Yes, sir.
so, if I get to spend time with somebody and can see that they're a person of character, then that's the people I want to be around, and I don't mind pouring some of that into them. But until then, they're gonna get superficial, and it's one of those things. All we can do is try to be honest and um, just do the best we can each and every day. But it's awesome to hear about all the stuff you guys got going on. I know you Beth doing grapes and you guys fishing and setting more stuff. And that is a beautiful thing when you think about it. It gets back down to brass tacks about what people with hunting and fishing, they always kind of we get these folks that get upset with us. And really those are usually your biggest um advocates for outdoor living. Um, and they're the ones that really continue to try to find new ways to feed animals and do more and more for the communities.
Well, I'll give you a good example of that, Mike. On Monday, Beth took the day off work, and the Pennsylvania Boat Commission, the Fish and Boat Commission, were stocking trout. And, we look forward to that every year. We've done it the last couple of years. And there was probably 25 volunteers, the same people that were there last year, that were carrying 5-gallon buckets full of water and fish down over a bank to stock a stream. Now, I don't really fish anymore. I've gone. It's not one of the big things that I do, but we were there that day. My wife, she doesn't really fish, but she buys a fishing license and stocks trout because it's good for the community. You
Right.
see little kids that are going to be catching those giant trout. It's something we enjoy giving back to the community and in the outdoors. And it's the same, 20, 25 people every year that are doing it. And I don't know how many of those guys are actual fishermen, but they do it for the community.
Yeah. It's all about that pushing for we're encroaching so much on nature, and we're always in the woods or out of the woods, and we're seeing so much being built up, and that's not a negative per se, but at the same token, I'm trying to do the opposite here on our property, and I'm trying to keep it where we're bending Mother Nature. You're never going to tame Mother Nature, but we're just trying to make it wheelchair friendly, and so we want to keep it green. And so around like our archery stations, for instance, I'm not paving it out or putting, crusher run and all that on every little piece of it. We can, joking around, we can just go shoot at the Walmart parking lot if we were going to concrete everything. But I love nature, and I love seeing mountains and waterways and green grass. And let's just try to keep some of that.
Yes,
And so,
sir.
we're near downtown Greenville, South Carolina, and so it is all concrete, and that's not again a negative thing on those days. But man, I sure do love to look outside and see the new pond filling up with water and thinking about more fish going in it, and people we can bring out to catch those fish, and just it's about having a good day.
And buddy, I'm glad you brought up your new pond, and I definitely want to hear more about that. This might be a good time for us to take a break, and we'll be bringing Coy in. And stay tuned, folks, because you're going to want to hear what Mike and Coy have to say about his new pond and what these two guys came up with as far as a dock and making it accessible.
Coy's one of those guys. We got Coy Varnum on with us today, and he's one of those guys. He really brings out a lot in people. Really, I know he's been a great friend to you and I, and every day that iron sharpening iron, I just about can guarantee
Yes,
by the
sir.
time I get up in the morning, I'm gonna have a Coy Varnum text in there, man, and it's always such a highlight. And I try to tell him that every day, but we don't podcast about it enough, and people don't share enough about the guys and girls they really have in their corner. But Mr. Coy, you one of those unique unicorns, my man. Uh,
I'm
Dude,
a,
I
I'm,
appreciate you so much more than you'll ever know. And your friendship's been vital over these years, man. But
man,
Coy Varnum, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm beyond. I'm blessed. I'm favored, and I'm highly thought of by my Lord. I've been out there this morning already chasing them birds. Got up at about 5 and 100 and had opportunities, and then left them gobbling to come be with you guys. Ain't nothing to it, man.
Dude,
Nothing
I
to
don't
it.
know how you did it. Me and Greg, as soon as you said that earlier, we were both shaking our head. No.
They'll
Coy, you are a better friend than Mike and I are ever going to be to you because
Yeah.
let me tell you, brother, if I was sitting in a ground blind and I had gobblers all around me gobbling, I don't care if I told you guys I'd be on the podcast today or not. I'd be texting and saying, "Sorry, boys, I can't make it." So
Right.
you are a better man than Mike and I would ever be. Uh,
100%.
we've been talking up your friendship, but my goodness, man, we so appreciate you, and we surely would have understood if you couldn't have made it this morning. So thank you for coming on.
Yes, sir. It's my pleasure. My pleasure. You guys mean a lot to me, and I like to reach out and when I tell somebody I'm going to do something, I try to stick to it. And they'll be there. I mean, it's just a turkey, and there'll be another day. But to be able to get on a podcast with y'all. I'm blessed, and I wanted to be here.
It's about chasing those pursuits, and we enjoy the heck out of Accessible Hunter podcast, and we're not knocking and taking anything away from that because we all love to hunt. But in this accessible pursuits, it's all about those same things. It's
Yeah.
about finding those pursuits and passions. And it was funny yesterday, Coy. I started to call you. I gave Greg a buzz. I was sitting at my garage yesterday, and I've got a newer lady that's she's working with me as my PCA, and I have my back turned towards where my pond is at, where the dam's at. And man, all of a sudden I heard a little bit of purr. I heard a little cluck,
Oh
and
no.
oh yeah, I turn around and there's two hens going up the walkway on the backside of my dam, and here's the Tom in full strut. He's just dancing away, dude. And
Oh
it's
my
one of
Lord.
those things. And Coy is mind blowing. I told Greg it's funny. We can be in the woods sometimes, and the slightest sound you cannot really pick up on them. But
Yeah.
these guys were over 200 yards away, and I could hear him as plain as day, and just as talkative as he could be, man.
It's amazing. It is amazing. They know when to shut up and when things are safe. Seems like um, this morning they were really sounding off. They got cranked up at round 10 till 6. They was gobbling, and they did their morning ritual, and I yelped to them a time or two, and they cut me off. So I said, "Well, they know right where I'm at. Ain't no sense saying nothing else."
Nah.
Now, Coy, you were in the ground blind this morning early, but you did not fail to send me a text
Oh no.
and wish me a good morning
Yeah.
and touch base with me. And
Yes,
I
sir.
got to say, from when I met you last year when we did the podcast, the Accessible Hunter podcast, you've been a really good friend to me, and I've looked forward to your text messages. And you've been faithful texting almost every morning, checking in on me, giving me a word or two of encouragement.
Yes,
And
sir.
Coy, it has meant the world to me. I want to tell you that. I appreciate you.
Well, Greg, if I can send someone something as simple as a text message and encourage them, and hey, check on them and find out how they're doing, and give them a positive outlook on that day, I, I know for myself it encourages me, and it uplifts me. So I've just I started, and I don't intend to quit. I mean, because if I can encourage and help someone, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do.
It's one of those things, Coy, that me and Greg were talking about it earlier, and we're seeing a lot of people with new injuries, and it's usually on their worst days, and so
Yeah.
we just try to help find ways to get them out of their head, and you're really good about doing that, and I'm like Greg, I really appreciate that, but for the folks that are newer to the podcast, can you tell them a little bit about your injury level, if you don't mind, and how long you've been hurt and some of the passions that you love to pursue.
Yeah. Um, Back June the 26th, 1976, I was diving, and uh, I I just hit the water wrong at the creek, and it paralyzed me. And doctors, when they first got me there to the ER Pensacola, they said I'd never move, from the shoulders down. And I said, well, you guys are just have white coats on. I know the great physician. And he slowly, I got movement back. And I enjoyed hunting and enjoyed fishing before the injury. And so I didn't see a reason to let it stop me. I just had to find out a different way to go about doing it. And it's I'm still passionate about it. I still love to fish and hunt, but I try to keep my priorities right. I want to keep the Lord first and family second, and then my country, and everything else fall into perspective. Um, but it's a blessing to meet guys like you and Greg that not only go through a lot of what I go through, but y'all are on the forefront, man, of putting out new information. I didn't have that. I didn't have the luxury, man. And so it was just learn as you can. And with what y'all put out with your podcast and the different people you have on there, it's encouraging to me for others that's going to come along that they'll have something. Hey, this guy went through this and this is how he handled it. And this situation arose and this is what it's just so much more information. And it's because of y'all putting out the podcast and having people on and discussing what we go through, what we face, what adversity, and how we deal with it. And we just can't let it get us down. We just have to press on, man.
Coy, we sure appreciate those encouraging words, man. Coming from you, they mean a lot. And being injured for as long as you have been, you're right. There was very little information out there. You couldn't Google things. You
No,
couldn't go online and see. But you
no,
didn't let anything stop you at that time. I mean, you still went back to work. You're knocking on doors for jobs. We know a little bit more about your story than other folks, but
uh,
you didn't let anything stop you. You were at the forefront, knocking on doors, saying, "Give me a chance to work."
yeah. I just thought everybody wanted a job, Greg, and come to find out that isn't so.
Yeah, we joke around about that too, man. We talked about it a little bit earlier. We're all the Gen X guys, and it
Yeah,
goes back into I didn't have any choice. By the time I was about 11 or 12, my,
yeah,
my dad said you getting out and doing something right, wrong, or indifferent. And so I've always, delivered newspapers or cut
yeah,
grass or,
yeah.
I joked around and said my dad pimped me out all over the neighborhood to go over and cut people's hedges and rake leaves and I was
Oh,
the neighborhood gopher, and
you ain't wrong.
you're you're 11 years old. It's about time you get a job, boy.
Yeah,
I know, right?
yeah.
I know what you mean, buddy. And hey, guys, talking about jobs, Mike was working on a pretty big project and pulled you in, Coy. You guys want to talk about this pond that I haven't seen yet that's filled with turkeys and soon going to be fishable from a couple different locations by chair?
It's one of those things, Greg. It's an awesome opportunity. We partnered with an organization here in South Carolina, and a lot of guys and girls that came alongside us to see what we're trying to do on the property to make it a little bit more wheelchair friendly and accessible. And I love our community. We have a really tight knit wheelchair community, or people with disabilities, physical and cognitive disabilities. And so I knew Coy's background after, being friends for years, and he's the guy I thought of right away. Wanted to have two different avenues, so we could look at it from different standpoints, right?
Right.
Wherever the sun's coming in, we want to be able to have it so we could fish morning or afternoon, not have the sun directly in your face, and be able to play off the wind as well. So we built a deck off the pond if you're facing it from the east. We got a deck on the right hand side that is a 12 by 16 deck. And then Coy helped me develop a nice pier that's out there, man. And he's one of these CAD guys. He can draw up anything, and so I just reached out and said, Coy, this is what I'm looking at doing, but can you help me over engineer this thing? I want to make sure we're keeping wheelchairs
Yeah.
out of the water, and what can we do to make this thing happen?
All we did was just draw it up. If anything, we went overkill on it. We didn't want to go underrated, so uh, it it was simple and opportunity to help a brother out. Yes, sir. Feet first, man. I'm in.
when you guys say, over engineering, I don't think people realize that some of us are strapped into these wheelchairs. I mean, I wear a chest strap. A lot of guys wear seat belts. And
Yes.
when you talk about underwater, we're in about a 450-pound anchor. So
Yes.
if the
Yeah.
engineering isn't top of the line and over engineered,
Right.
it can become a problem pretty quick. So I'm glad Mike reached out to you, and all of your years of experience, you were the guy to talk to about that.
Yes, sir. Um, when I try to design something for someone in our shape, or thinking that there may be someone in our shape using it, I'll definitely go overboard, go overkill on it. Is we're already we're already limited enough. We don't need anything else. We just be able to enjoy it.
Yeah. And that was the thing. I just told Coy, I said, hey, let's figure out how we can use telephone poles and, go with excess lumber, 2x12s, and really bolt this thing to death. I want it enough we can park a tractor on.
Yeah.
But, it goes back, Greg. You said it. One of the first things I do when I get close to the water or we're getting on our pontoon boat or whatever, I unstrap my feet, take my chest strap off. I encourage the guys and girls that are with us, and I'm like, hey, I can still swim like a fish. But the unfortunate part is if you go in the water, there's no way to know which way you're going to be orientated.
Right.
Are you going to land with the chair on you, or give us a fighting chance to get to you? But the biggest kicker, and we don't want to make this a negative podcast, as I told Coy, hey, help me figure out how we can keep wheelchairs out of the water for the wrong reasons.
Right.
If you want to get wet, that's fine, but we don't want to go in the water for the wrong reasons. But
No, no.
You don't want to go scuba diving at the spur of the moment. If you go
nah,
scuba diving, you want tanks on and do it right, not strapped to a chair. That's for sure.
right. We don't want to Jacques Cousteau this thing off the back, and the next thing you know, we're submerged. So, yeah, we're trying to keep it a positive.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we put rails around it. Mike and I talked. We put rails around it. You can still fish over it, but at the same time, you got some added safety there too. So
Right. And we're talking about safety, a lot of people that may be newly injured are not as good of a driver as they will
yeah,
become.
Mhm.
yeah,
That type of thing. If you have an individual that maybe has an attendant control on their wheelchair, you have
yeah,
to be so cautious whether you're getting on an elevator or you're going down a ramp or you're going around a corner. Sometimes I'll see people going really fast in a power chair in a crowded location. And I'm thinking, man, if somebody steps in front of you or if a little kid comes in front of your path, you have to be able to stop that thing. And um,
oh,
I'm always trying to be a little over cautious on how I drive my chair around people or around obstacles or around water, especially. But it's something we all need to keep in mind for sure.
yes, sir, for
You
sure,
know,
Greg.
it's one of those things. These chairs, I tell people all the time, they're unforgiving. The
Mhm.
chair doesn't know if you meant to hit back or forward; it just goes and does. And so you don't want you to get your jacket tangled up on the hand control, and the next thing you know, you're in the water. So I always try to put some buffers in. We bolt down 4x4 post, even
Mm-hmm.
on the front of these things, just to try to keep the chairs inside the ride. If
Yep.
you want,
Yeah.
it's like being at the carnival. Keep your hands and feet inside the ride while the ride is moving.
Oh man.
Um, but it really comes back down to that safety protocol. Let's just have fun and get back out there and do it for the right reasons. But make sure you understand these chairs are big, bulky, and they are unforgiving.
I don't know if you guys felt this way about your power chair or Mike, you started off in a manual, but when I was first injured, I could not stand to look at my wheelchair charging in the corner. I definitely viewed it as something as a negative, but the more years you spend in it, you start to view it as a mobility device. And,
Yeah.
without a good chair, would be stuck in the house. So I know my viewpoints on power chairs have certainly changed over the years for the better.
Yes, sir. I
And
was in a manual chair when I first got hurt, when they first sent me home, and I, I I told them when I left there, I said, "Now, I'm definitely going to need a power chair." They said, "Oh, you need to push and build your muscle up." I said, "Yeah, but I don't live in the city. I'm out in the boonies, and it's thick sand, and it was a chore, man. It was a job." And I remember the first power chair I got, and it made life a whole lot easier. Um, it just did. Um, and now I've been in the power chair ever since. And I still try to be as active as I can to stay built up, but um, that's like hunting. I mean, I couldn't go by myself if I didn't have the power chair,
That's
and
right.
I do. I hunt a lot by myself.
You
I
know,
keep
technology has come a long way.
yes,
And technology has come a long way. Our chairs now have really come out and got to where they'll
yeah.
go a lot more. But Greg and I are both in permobiles, and you know if you look at insurance and you look at paperwork and protocols, you know our chairs are really it's written as the chairs for indoor use only. I guess they assume we don't have any outside responsibilities or whatever.
Uh,
But I know Coy, you're in one of the what is it, the Bounders or one
yeah,
of those?
yeah. The big bounder. Yeah,
Yeah. And that's that's one of those things our chairs can really go and do. Technology's really made a big change
yeah.
and gives us opportunities to go. But people need to understand too, these are accoutrements that are our legs, and it's the only
Mhm.
way we are as independent as we are.
Yes, sir.
That's
They
right.
they get us from point A to point B, and we don't get stuck in between. Is what the goal is. And I've put mine I've really put mine in some places that people just would not believe. I'm telling you, they
Yeah.
wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
I had a guy because I had to call him one day, Mike. I went deer hunting and it had rained, and I said, "Well, I believe you let my chair make it through there." Well, it was raining, and I had my poncho on over me in the chair, and the chair didn't quite make it, so I had to text him. I said, "Hey, you got your four-wheeler handy?" He said, "Yeah." "What you need?" I said, "Well, I'm back here at the back plot and I'm stuck." And so he comes back there on his four-wheeler, and he said, he's laughing. I said, "What is it?" He said, "No one would believe my story today that I got out in the rain and I had to go pull a guy out that was in a wheelchair."
That's that's a
But
fact, Coy.
it happens. I mean, yeah,
And it could be something as simple as being out hunting and being maybe where it was a little bit of a tight area, or it could be something simple like getting stuck in a gravel driveway.
yes,
Down at the farm last year, my wife had to pull me out of the driveway with the van, using our tie down straps because I
yeah,
buried it in the gravel at the driveway. So you never know where you're going to get stuck, but you sure find out who your friends are quick, and they
yes,
better bring a strap.
yes, sir, yes, sir.
You know, it's funny that you say that. Sometimes I put myself in harm's way. I tell people, don't do what I do.
Yeah,
A lot of times I'm jumping off in a mud hole or whatever else. But sometimes, Greg, you're right, man. It's just about you drive off the curb the wrong way. And
Yep.
these chairs, like I said, I'm in a permobile now. You got six tires on the ground, and if you don't turn them all a certain way, you can really get bound up if that drive tire gets a little loose. It doesn't take a lot.
no, it don't, Mike.
It can happen in seconds, man. I'm very cautious of it with gravel and wet grass and things. And I'm in a permobile F5 as well, Mike. And that's where the years of experience come in. And
Hmm.
sometimes people will say, "Oh, we can get you in or come around this way," and you just look at it and say, "No,
No,
I,
Yeah.
I don't think I can. I don't want to risk it." And then they'll give you "Oh, we can lift you right up this one step or,
no,
get you out." And I'm like, "No, I've got a little bit more experience than that, buddy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try it."
yeah.
Yeah. 100%. You know, you can look at it and say, yeah, maybe we could do that. But let's just not do
It's
that.
just,
Right,
yeah,
right. It's going to turn into a problem that might be a half hour of trying to dig this chair out and pull me out. That let's try a different way. We can still do it, but let's try a different way.
Yeah.
But funny enough, sometimes, Greg, my wife still gets upset when she looks on YouTube or whatever, and I'm strapped to the back of a trailer and we're boogieing down the road to go chase a bird or something. She's like, "You guys are educated. What kind of decision-making skills do you have?"
Oh, man, when birds come into play, sometimes reason goes out the window that I,
Yes.
I think I can get over there just another 50 feet. That's where the blind needs to be. And then before you know it, you're stuck.
Yeah.
Well,
Go
you
ahead, Coy.
you'd mentioned was in a blind this morning. I've got a three-sided blind, Greg, that I like to use because I can hear better, and if I need to move it, I can grab it and go. I'm not tied to, just a regular blind that we get in. I've got some like the door that lifts at the back all the way up that you roll in,
Yep.
and those are nice to deer hunt out of. But
Yeah.
turkey hunting, I need to be more mobile, and so that's what I've got. And I'll try to send you a picture and make you a little old video clip of it, and it really helps because you can, as they say, running gun. I can roll and stroll with it.
Roll and stroll, man. I
I
Yeah,
I
like
like
it.
that, and
yes,
you're definitely successful at it because you bagged a bird already in Florida this year, so you're one up on Mike and I. But man, it was so good having you on the podcast today, and we would have never ever torn you away from gobbling birds, man. If we would have known that was the situation, next time you just got to text us and say,
oh my,
brothers, we're in the birds here, so we would have understood. But that's how good of a friend you are, Coy, that when you say you're going to do something, you do it, man. And we appreciate you.
iron sharpens iron, brother. Iron.
Coy, before we let you get going, man, other than hunting, what other projects and stuff do you got stewing? I know you're involved in your church and your community a lot, but what other things you got going on this spring and summer?
Oh man. Well, we have our men's Bible study every other Monday night. It's continuing to grow in the Lord's blessing. We get together and we fellowship, and if you can get guys around, where they'll open up and be honest, and that's the way I like to be. I like to be open and honest, and just there. What you see is what you get, and I don't put on a mask. I'm just me, and the more people that realize they can be themselves around others, and the more camaraderie you can have, the more conversation, the deeper conversation you can have. Um, so that's going and growing. Lord's blessing. I've still got some plans I'm supposed to be working on. I had a guy text me this morning. I said, "Yes, sir. I'm hunting, but I'll get back to it." So I've got some plans to do, um, and I told you about a pontoon boat, and
Yes,
sent you a picture of it.
yes.
Well, I went and found another one and purchased it, and I got it down there at the marina now. The guys fixing the tilt and trim on it, so hopefully I have some good fishing this summer. Shortly after turkey season.
Absolutely.
So we'll get you some videos and clips of that too. But Lord's just blessing. He's taking care, and he always does.
And Coy, I want to make sure that I tell you thank you for your prayers and the prayer group. I know you guys have been praying for my
Yes, sir.
healing. I've been going through a lot with my pressure wound, and Mike has as well. And we appreciate those men and women that are, thinking about us and praying for us. And
Sir.
we appreciate everything you do, man. I can't tell you how much I think about you, throughout the day and wonder what you're up to and what you're doing.
Well, those guys are super. I mean, they're just as steadfast, and when they tell you, like when I put your name out, you can bet, brother, you getting prayers answered, and they're praying for you. They're not talk. They walk the walk, and that's what we need more this day. We need more men that desire a sincere, close walk and close fellowship with the Lord, and not just well, I'm in trouble, so Lord, I'm gonna call on you now.
Yeah,
That's the way it happens a lot of times. We wait till we get in trouble. Oh Lord, I need you then. Well, let's
right.
call on him in the good times, man. Call on him in the good times.
Yeah, it's again, Coy, thank you again for taking your time to come on here and share a little bit. You're always a wealth of knowledge. Always got that upbeat spirit, man, always smiling. And it rubs off, dude. It is very much contagious.
It
And I truly appreciate you and your friendship, but just to hit those little pillars too about leadership and being able to show more and more people in chairs as leaders and guides
yes,
and positive role models. That's what we're supposed to be doing, right? Shining and being the hands and feet that
exactly.
continue to go. But thank you again for the time and efforts that you put into it. And again, sharpening me and Greg daily, every morning. Dude, it is mind blowing to think about all the time and effort you put into it. But um, dude, you're one of a kind, man. And we got to get a group together. I got to get you two over here to South Carolina. We
I,
need to be chasing birds all over the place and fishing all over. And man,
I,
life's too short to let this stuff get by. We need to
I
get on
know.
it.
You're right, Mike. You're right.
Absolutely. Well, boys, I hope you have a great day. Coy, you get out there and get after them birds again, and we'll be looking for some pictures of your bird and your pontoon boat. And Mike, I hope everything's going good for you the rest of the day, and you guys take care of yourselves.
We're
Uh,
going to do it, brother.
Always good to see you guys.
You too, man. Love you guys.
Love
Love you.
you guys too.
All right, man.